In the summer of 19... To start, I broke my right arm. I was riding my sweet black Huffy XT with the banana seat and the orange flag on the back. Up and down the street. You got one, don't you? Up and down the street in my neighborhood. And for some crazy reason, when I got in front of my house, I spazzed out and I lost control and I crashed into my own car. As I was getting back up on my bike, my arm felt a little funny. So I looked down to check it out and see what was going on. When I looked down, I let out a horrific scream, like something you hear out of a horror movie, because what I saw was my arm was in a form that it was not supposed to be in. It was in a shape much like a trapezoid. So my father grabbed me, threw me in the car gently, and we drove to the hospital. And at the hospital, I had to call in a specialist to come and fix my arm. For 8 weeks, I sat in a cast on the sideline at school because I couldn't play in the playground with a cast on my arm from my wrist to my shoulder. For 8 weeks, I was pining for my arm to be out of this cast. And finally, the day came, and we went back to the doctor, and he took the electric pizza cutter, and he cut the cast off my arm. And I remember going into the appointment wondering, is my arm ever going to look the same? Is it really, truly going to be back to what it was before? Is it going to be as good as it should be? And to my surprise, it was. In fact, it was stronger than it was before. You see, I share this story with you because this story is very much like my faith journey. The early years of my life in my family were not good. Divorce, abuse, domestic violence were all part of my home growing up. As a child, often I was beaten with a belt because I was misbehaving. And what this did is that it changed my mind to think these things about myself, that I am not lovable, I am not good enough, I never will be. When all I really wanted was what every child wants, to be loved unconditionally. At 13 years old, I sat in church, and the pastor was standing down there at the altar every Sunday morning. Who wants to meet Jesus? And finally, I got up and I went forward as an 8th grade 13-year-old. And I thought, I'm going to go give Jesus my heart. And maybe now I'll finally get the love that I have been craving since I was born. The problem is that I took that thinking into my relationship with God. And so I thought, God will love me if I am good enough. And so, Jesus, please love me. And so I tried hard every single day to do good for Jesus. And then I'd go to bed at night, and tears would come down my eyes as I looked up at the ceiling, as I went through all the sins of the day, and I would beg with God, please, please still love me, forgive me. But I kept screwing up. Then I read the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. Joseph, the guy, Jacob's son, who got the really sweet coat. Totally rejected by his family. In fact, his brothers wanted to kill him. But instead, they sold him into slavery. I guess it was kind of an upgrade. He was put in prison for things he never did. While in prison, he encountered people who promised to remember him, who ended up forgetting him. Joseph was alone and abandoned, feeling insignificant. But yet, at the end, God fulfills the dreams that he had given him. I thought, that could be me. I could be Joseph. I want to be Joseph. God, please let me be him. And so, what did I do? I tried harder, still in that way of living and thinking that if I just keep trying, God will love me and he will restore me. And for 17 years, I lived that way. In fact, even as a youth pastor, I would meet with my students and teach them and disciple them and tell them how much God loves them no matter what, that he would never leave them, never forsake them, no matter what. But then I would walk out of the room and I'd say this to myself, that doesn't apply to you, dude. God doesn't love you the way you're telling them that he loves them. It's like going to the doctor, driving yourself there, just getting into the parking lot. The medicine is just inside the building. All you got to do is get out of the car and go in. But I just stayed in the car because I didn't think I deserved it. I wasn't good enough for that medicine. Years later, I was reading my Bible, and I came to the book of John. I love the book of John. And I got to the 5th chapter, and I want to share just a short part of that with you today. In John chapter 5, it says this. It says, sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which is in Aramaic called Bethsaida. That's just the place where it's at. And they're surrounded by all these colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie. All these crippled people who couldn't walk and who needed healing would go to this pool. Because why? Because they thought that pool had healing properties, and if they could just get in the water, they would be healed. There lied there a blind, lame, and paralyzed people, and the one who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in that condition for a long time, he asked them one simple question. Do you want to get well? Do you want to be healed? Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Then Jesus said, okay, get up. Pick up your mat and walk. At once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. And the day on which took place was the Sabbath day. You see, all these people were there, and this man had been there for 38 years, healed, requiring healing, broken, insignificant, alone. Imagine all the people that walked past him for 38 years and never paid him once any attention. But here comes the Son of God into his life and directs his attention right onto him. And he asks them, do you want to be healed? When I read that, I want to read to you what God said to me personally. He said, Joe, it was never my plan for you to be beaten and ridiculed growing up. It was never my plan for you to think so lowly of yourself and to feel so insignificant. It was never my plan for you to feel like you have to earn my love and affection. What is my plan is to heal you and to restore you and make you whole. My plan is to fulfill those dreams I gave you back when you were a teenager. My plan is to pour out on you the love you have been craving since you were born. And my plan is for you to know that I am so proud of you that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything to earn my love and affection. My plan is for you to hear my voice when I call you son. Joe, you're my son, but for 30 years, you've been in this place. Do you want to be healed? That was the beginning of my real faith. That was the beginning of life change for me. Today, I stand here on this stage and I speak confidently and tell you that I know exactly who I am. And it's not because of what I wear, what I drive, where I live, how much money I make, or what anybody in this room thinks of me, or anybody on the planet thinks of me, because it's all about Jesus and what he thinks of me and how he restored me. But that took time, okay? It took time. Much like being in a cast for 8 weeks to heal a broken arm, it took time. And even now, I'm going to tell you that those old thoughts and those old ways still try to creep into my mind, those lies that you're insignificant and you're not good enough. And so do I do. I battle. We battle. God gave me dreams too when I was younger, just like Joseph. I dreamed of one day being married and having a family, a large family. And guess what? God gave me a beautiful, amazing wife and 5 awesome kids. God gave me a dream when I was a teenager. I shared this with my pastor one day. I said, I have this dream that one day I'm going to stand in front of a large crowd of people, and I'm just going to be teaching them and telling them about Jesus and sharing his love and what he did for me. And guess what? You tonight are part of the fulfillment of that dream for me as I stand here and I'm able to share these things with you. God is at work. A year ago, my son Joey fell and broke his arm. Here's the cast. And he broke it right before summer started. So he was bumming when he couldn't run around with his buddies with a cast on. But the weeks passed, and he was worried about what his arm was going to look like when the cast was opened. And the day came, and we took the electric pizza cutter again. Things don't change, it seems. And we opened it up, and his arm was whole again. And he was ecstatic that God had healed him. You see, we are fragile. We are human. We break easily. There are broken people in this room tonight. And I'm here to tell you tonight that God is a God who heals. and restores and wants you to be whole. Have you been sitting in the same spot like the man in John? Do you feel insignificant, unloved? Do you wonder if you exited the planet, if anybody ever noticed? I want to tell you tonight that you matter to God and that He is here tonight and He's standing with His arm out, extended like He did to the man at the pool, and He's saying these words: do you want to be well?